What is de minimis? And there's like 5 answers to this but I'll start with this one.
Can you read upside down, or do you want to read my shirt?
Significance, or that's easier.
Yeah.
Lacking significance or importance, so minor as to be disregarded.
Is that why you put this on my chest?
Yes.
All right, welcome to the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. Aaron Bezzant here, doing the intro and acting as host because we've got a special guest today, and his name is Clint Reid. Clint, we got you on the other side of the aisle here.
I'm excited to be on the podcast. Oh, wait, I've been here almost every time.
You've been here almost.
I missed one.
You missed one.
I did.
You were sick that day.
I was.
I had to go it alone. So
now you're back moderating as a host.
Yep.
What else is different, Aaron?
Our location is very different right now.
This is awesome.
Yeah, where are we right now?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the history of Zonos, I guess, a little bit. So we're inside of a hangar, which St. George, Utah. There was an old airport that was on the top of a bluff. It was like landing on an aircraft carrier, right? The plane's coming and little runway, kind of sketchy. So they moved the airport, 10 years ago. So this hangar was abandoned. And I was walking by this hangar one day, and it was just nasty as all get out.
It was very nasty.
What if we renovated this sucker? So we did, and we've been working out of this for past couple years. But the reason we're in here today is we actually have some space because we built a container office, out
of shipping containers.
So fitting, right?
Yes,
like we're facilitating trade around the world, and packages used to move through this hangar in here, come, from all over the world into St. George, Utah, on these little FedEx feeder planes. And then we have containers that we're working out of that we're moving packages all over the world at one point. So this is fun. Yeah, it's a cool space. I'm really glad we're here.
It's an amazing space. It's just the whole area we're in. We're up on a bluff, just outlooking the city, beautiful scenery. You can see Zion National Park in the distance. I mean, epic. It is. So I feel very blessed to be here. I also feel very blessed to be having this podcast today to talk about this subject. But it's worth mentioning, this is episode 40.
We've done 40 of these.
We've done 40 of these.
Wow.
Things.
Almost every week. So this is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm excited, I think, on episode 40. Now we're going to take a reflective look. We're going to go back in time, get a little nostalgic on kind of some ancient trade, talking about the history of de minimis. That was one of our first episodes.
Yeah.
But we just kind of dove right into the current state of de minimis and what's going on around the world. Now we're going to go back in time and say, where in the heck did this all come from? And I have done absolutely zero prep work for this and zero research. But you, on the other hand, you've been doing a deep dive,
this
right?
This is a stretch for me, right? Because I'm not a historian, though I love de minimis and talking about de minimis. I've done my best to do some research. So it is kind of fascinating, some of the history, but I need to, get my hat on, or I mean my shirt, Aaron. So I'd unveiled this accidentally to you earlier today because it was so hot. And that you're like, you've got a shirt. I do.
Did you order 2 of them by chance?
So I have some good news, and I have some bad news. Well, let's go with the good news first. I actually did order 2.
Oh,
okay,
yes.
You got to put it on.
I got to put it on?
I'll tell you the story. Yeah.
Okay.
So I
love it.
That I first have to thank and give credit to GHY Mac at GHY, because Mac is the one that has the de minimis hat that I'm jealous of, and he hasn't sent me one. So I thought I would order a shirt
to this podcast,
and I did it too so that I could answer the very first question, which I know is coming, which is, what is de minimis? And there's like 5 answers to this but I'll start with this one.
Can you read upside down, or do you want to read my shirt?
Significance, or that's easier.
Yeah.
Lacking significance or importance, so minor as to be disregarded.
Is that why you put this on my chest?
Yes.
So now when I walk around, everyone's going to look at me and think I'm labeling myself.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now I gave you the good news. You have a shirt. Do you want the bad news? Oh, actually, there's other good news. The shirt was free. That shirt.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay for it?
No. I didn't have to pay for it either.
What? Okay. What's the bad news?
Well, the print's kind of sideways. So they screwed up my first order, and the print is going like sideways.
Okay.
So I gave you that one.
That's kind of cool.
You'll
though,
notice when you get in the
right?
mirror. But right now, you look fine. Just
Do I just
sit sideways. Dude, looks great.
right there like
Yep.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's probably why this shirt's pretty insignificant, right?
Yes. Not worth much.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about history of de minimis. But before we dive into that, do you know why ancient traders never took a vacation?
Why?
Because every time they tried to see the world, someone taxed their efforts.
Okay.
But I got better jokes than that.
Okay. Do you have
I wanted to start out with kind of a
do you have
joke.
another one right now?
Yeah, let's do it. So let me see here. Which one do I like? Ooh. How did the Romans cut their hair?
How?
With Caesars.
Speaking of the Romans.
Speaking of the Romans, let's talk about them.
So de minimis comes from a Latin legal principle. Okay. De minimis non curt lex. And that means the law does not concern itself with trifles.
Aha.
Yes. So it really is about minimal things, which we were talking about. It's like I said, feels like there's a million definitions around this. But it did, it first appeared in the 2nd century, and it was, the concept Roman judges used it to draw attention to things so it started with like judges and like as a legal term. Didn't really come into trade until, let's see, sometime in like 500 BCE, something like that, between there and, where they would just have like these exemptions for merchant traders. So it wasn't like an official like number, but there was just this process or this, concept of just a de minimis between the traders, all the merchant traders with Rome.
So that's kind of how it got started into trade.
Yes.
Then, right?
Yep.
And it was really just more of a, I don't want to waste my time on stuff if I'm not going to get a return.
Exactly.
Right? So we're talking a cost benefit analysis.
And that hasn't changed today. Same argument today. So very, very fitting. Now so we're going to talk about 4 periods. The first one is this kind of classical period, right? Which is where it gets introduced. Really, Romans, merchant traders. The second one is medieval trade from like 500 to 1500. And then early modern period, we'll talk about that. 19th century standardization, and then kind of 20th century, and then post-World War II. That's more than 4. I think that was 6.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm not good at counting here.
No.
How many we got here?
1,
2, 3, 4,
5. We're going to talk about those 5 periods. I mean, there's the current period, which we'll touch on, but I think that's we might want to do that in a different episode, a little more detail.
Yeah.
So let's kind of go to this second period, which is medieval trade. Mathematical calculations for like duties and stuff. Do you know where that came from?
Tell me. This period?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the kind of the medieval trade period, 500 to 1500, and it was Islamic. Like it was really the first. So math, so much of mathematics comes from Islam, and they're the ones that introduced the mathematical customs calculations for duty.
Ah.
Well, it came from at least from the research I've been able to do.
How do you define mathematical customs calculations? Because I mean, there has to be some. There had to be.
I'm imagining a Roman clearing a package for some fish, and they're like, yeah, this feels like about this much in duty. I mean, what? Or maybe they just count them and say, we're going to charge just $5 per. Like, okay, that's not real math. We've seen some real math in some customs and duty calculations where it's like, FOB or not FOB, the
ad valorem.
That was what I'm looking for. Yeah. Yeah. Where you start doing percentages and things like that. That's what I would imagine. What do you think?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, that's as much research as I know about it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Don't ask me too much. Let's move to the early modern period. Okay. 1500 to 1800, right? So now your ancestors, my ancestors, they're colonizing, right? The Dutch, the British, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese. So the Dutch East India Company instituted value thresholds for small shipments. British navigation included provisions for low-value goods. So they're all doing something kind of around this de minimis. Spanish Empire developed colonial custom systems. And I guess the French standardized some custom practices, things like that. But into those systems, okay, actually, this is kind of maybe duplicative. But okay, the Portuguese had value-based exemptions.
So that would
sounds
be
like de minimis.
The de minimis we're talking about based on value.
Yeah, the Portuguese did that. Is there anything else? I mean, you have some of the notes here.
Well, I think on here, one that catches my eye in your notes is the Dutch colonies. They had trade. They were trader friendly, minimal thresholds, very trade friendly. Now, when you think of the EU, there's one country that seems like a lot of people try to get access into the EU through.
Amsterdam.
Yeah, so we're talking the Dutch, right? Yes. They're still, still to this day, they're viewed as the more trader friendly country in the EU.
So this has continued since, 1500, 1800s. Wow. Okay. 19th century, though, started to bring in some standardization here. Because I think, what I'm imagining is this evolution of trade where, the Romans, Silk Road, all of that, like it's loose rules, I guess, or some guidelines. It's like, but it's not like, globally standard, but now trade's happening all over the world. Obviously, a lot of colonization has happened.
Yeah. And I'd say the world is beginning to become more connected.
Yes.
Right. Like, I mean, historically, everybody was doing their own thing, didn't even really know what was going on in other parts of the world.
So if you're going to bring everybody in together to talk about it, where are you going to bring them to have a big discussion?
Brussels.
Yeah, exactly. Which they did in 1853.
Okay.
And it was the first international attempt to standardize practices, introduce some kind of concept of uniform minimal values, which isn't really uniform. I don't know how.
A uniform de minimis?
Like, I don't know.
Because we don't have uniform de minimis today.
No, we do not.
Go back to
probably didn't go very well.
Yeah, that
kind of, and they established some basic principles around exemptions. Let's see, the British Empire's influence on this. They were really, I think, the first ones to create standardized practices across the colonies. But this becomes more and more formal as you get out of the 1800s into the 1900s. So first it was like, hey, let's all convene, in Brussels. Early 20th century, like we're going to have an international coalition in the 1920s. The League of Nations efforts is what it's called. And that was supposedly the first attempt at global standards and introduced uniform documentation and common value thresholds.
And this, we're talking 1920s here, right?
Yep.
That's just 100 years ago then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just 100 years ago. But I think what's interesting here is the kind of a uniform documentation.
Yeah.
Piece that. How do you?
Can you imagine
have
trying
at
to
least
do
one set of documentation?
Can you imagine trying to do global trade without that?
Oh,
it would be a mess. I mean, there's still a lot of non-uniform things that happen.
Right. I mean, there's still specific commercial invoices that are different by country, like requirements anyway.
Yeah. But still, it's still pretty standard if you want to ship something globally. But
imagine if there was none of the guardrails of a commercial invoice.
It'd create a nice need for technology.
Yes, it would.
For sure.
Hey, you know what I'm excited about being in this hangar is we're going to have people walking through here and we're going to hear them in the background. Just feel the vibe.
It's our live studio audience.
I hope they cheer when they come by. Okay. Post World War II, right? And then we're going to get to kind of today, but I'm not going to. Okay, there's GATT Impact 1947. I don't know if there's anything interesting in there to you. Still standardization, things like that. Yeah. I think what's interesting is this 1952 is where something stuck.
WCO.
The WCO. World Customs Organization. And if you go back to our podcast around HS codes, you can learn a lot about the WCO. I think that Chanel dove into that, if I recall.
Yep.
Which was, pretty cool. But this is where customs procedures started to get standardized, and common definitions, things like that. Guidelines around threshold practices.
And it makes perfect sense as you see, as you walk through the different periods, as the world becomes more and more connected, they're required. It necessitated more standardization and uniform practices across, from country to country, so that way they could trade and communicate more efficiently.
Yep. Now, Aaron, let's go to today, and then we're going to dive into this in a minute. But what country has the highest de minimis threshold?
Based on today's exchange rates, it's got to be the U.S., right?
Yes, I was hoping you would know the answer to that question, but it is. I mean, even though Australia has 1,000, I think like we talked about this earlier that back in 2008 they would have probably had the most generous threshold. Not anymore.
Yep.
So the U.S. has been extremely generous, and there's a lot of history there, but I want to save that for another podcast.
So we've gone through kind of just a general history of de minimis and trade. The U.S., I would love to take a deeper dive into the history within the U.S. because that one's fascinating. And then there's a lot of interesting things happening moving forward in the U.S. too around that. So this has been great. I think this is a good stopping point. So let's put a pin in it here, and I'm going to enjoy this new crooked shirt of mine.
I shouldn't have said anything and just seen how long it would have taken you to figure that out.
If I wear this in public, do you think anyone will say anything about it? How crooked is it? Is it pretty bad?
It was bad enough for me to tell them that they messed up and I wanted a new shirt.
You just wanted to get me a shirt.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. All right. Hey, thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.